In court, I faced my own family after they tried to take what was mine, and I was determined to make them regret everything they'd done. My heels strike the marble floor of the Portland courthouse, each step a thunderclap in the frozen silence. I feel eyes drilling into my back, whispers slithering through the gallery as I walk the longest 50 feet of my life. Reporters lean forward in their seats, notepads poised like weapons. The Langford name scandal unfolds in real time, and I'm center stage whether I want to be or not. I don't turn when I hear my mother's laugh, quiet, cutting, and deliberately timed for maximum humiliation. It's a sound I know too well, the elegant knife she's wielded my entire life. From the corner of my eye, I catch my father shaking his head, disappointment radiating from him in familiar waves. For 32 years I've been Beatrice Langford, the daughter who could never quite measure up. Today, that changes. Today, for the first time, I'm not the one on trial. They are. I take my seat beside federal prosecutor Sandra Miller, arranging my navy blazer with hands I refuse to let tremble. Sandra gives me a subtle nod, one professional to another. The weight of the evidence we've gathered presses against us, like a physical presence. "You ready?" she whispers. "Am I ready to dismantle the empire my family built?" The Langford name means something in Portland. 12 rental developments sprawling across the city, 3 lakefront properties glistening on the water's edge, over $8 million in real estate holdings. My father built that empire brick by brick over 40 years. Graham Langford, the man whose approval I chased like a shadow that always stretched just beyond my reach. Behind us sits my mother, Portland's beloved socialite. Diane Langford, queen of charity galas and symphony fundraisers, whose grace and philanthropy mask something far colder. She crosses her legs at the ankle, pearl necklace catching the fluorescent lights, perfect posture, perfect smile, perfectly cruel. And Ethan, my brother, lounges 2 rows back, scrolling through his phone as if this is all a minor inconvenience. 35 years old and still the golden son who could do no wrong. He doesn't even look up when I enter, his dismissal as complete as it was when we were children. My mind flashes back to 2016, the housing downturn that nearly broke us. I remember my father's face, gray with stress as the numbers bled red month after month. I remember stepping in when his health failed, working 18-hour days to keep Langford Holdings from collapse. I remember withdrawing $520,000 of my personal savings, money I'd set aside for my own future, and pouring it into the family business, like water on dying plants. No contracts, no guarantees, just faith in my family and the company that bore our name. 3 months later, when the market corrected and profits returned, I sat at our mahogany dining table watching my mother cut into her steak. The knife sliced through with surgical precision, her movements delicate and refined. "The board has concerns," my father said, not meeting my eyes, "about certain financial manipulations." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Financial manipulations? You mean the money that saved the company?" "The manner in which it was done," my mother interjected, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "It shows a certain overreach." I looked between them, waiting for the punchline that never came. "I'm being dismissed? After everything I've done?" Mother set down her knife, eyes cold as winter glass. "You were born to follow, not to lead, Beatrice. Some of us simply must accept our place." The words carved into me deeper than any blade. I left that night with nothing but a folder of balance sheets tucked under my arm, proof of my contribution and my dismissal. The silence as I walked out the door was deafening, my identity stripped away with a few careful words. Now, sitting in this courthouse, I meet Sandra's gaze and find something I haven't felt in years: respect. "Yes," I tell her, voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "I'm ready." The courtroom falls silent as Judge Alan McKinney enters. His face gives nothing away as he calls the court to order, neutral eyes surveying the room. I wonder if he can feel the weight of what's about to happen. Years of manipulation laid bare for all to see. I can feel my father's eyes on my back, that familiar weight of disappointment that once threatened to crush me. I remember how he'd look whenever I questioned family decisions, that slow blink that dismissed me more effectively than words ever could. From the corner of my eye, I see my mother's subtle adjustments, straightening her already perfect posture, tilting her chin just so. The embodiment of maternal concern masking the architect of 1,000 small, undermining comments, each designed to keep me in my place. And Ethan, now finally looking up from his phone, smugness radiating from him like heat. The pattern is so clear now, the control, the manipulation, the steady erosion of my confidence. For years I thought it was love, thought the problem was me. How wrong I'd been. As the judge begins speaking, a strange calm settles over me. This isn't about money anymore. It isn't about properties, or companies, or even inheritance. It's about truth, and for the first time in my life, the truth is on my side. I straighten my spine and face forward, ready for the reckoning that's been years in the making. 3 years after walking out of the Langford mansion, I'd created a life that was distinctly mine. My Portland loft apartment sat 5 stories above the city, its industrial windows framing Mount Hood on clear days. Simple furniture, clean lines, nothing like the ornate excess I'd grown up with. A place where I made the rules. Until the day a gray parcel appeared at my door. No sender, no stamp, just my name in block letters that made my stomach clench. I carried it inside, setting it on my kitchen counter like it might detonate. For 20 minutes I circled it, making coffee I wouldn't drink, straightening things that weren't crooked. When I finally tore open the packaging, a sealed envelope slid out. For her eyes only. H. Langford, my grandfather's handwriting. Henry had been dead 6 years, but I'd recognize those blocky capital letters anywhere. They belonged to a different era, when men signed their names with the weight of their word behind each stroke. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside, a will, handwritten, dated 2004, with Henry's unmistakable signature at the bottom. I, Henry Langford, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath all properties, holdings, and assets to my granddaughter, Beatrice Langford. I sank onto my couch, the paper shaking in my grip. This couldn't be real. The court had read grandfather's will 3 weeks after his funeral. I'd been there, watched Ethan's smirk grow as every asset transferred to him, not a penny, not a memento for me. I pulled up the probate records on my laptop, comparing the documents side by side. The court version named Ethan exclusively, but this version, Henry's true version, left everything to me. The signatures didn't match. Close but not identical. One had been forged. Oregon's digital will registry didn't exist back then. A legal blind spot easily exploited by someone who knew the system. Someone like my father. My phone rang 3 days later, startling me from a fitful sleep filled with courtrooms and forgeries. "Is this Beatrice Langford?" A man's voice graveled with age. "Who's asking?" "Caleb Warner. I worked for your grandfather's attorney." He paused. "The one who vanished in 2009. My chest tightened. "What do you know about that?" He refused to alter Henry's will. "That's why he disappeared." His voice dropped. "I've been afraid to come forward, but I can't live with it anymore." We arranged to meet at a small cafe near the Willamette River. I arrived early, choosing a corner table with a view of both entrances. Caleb Warner was older than I expected, mid-70s, with thinning white hair and glasses that magnified pale blue eyes. He walked with a slight limp, scanning the room before approaching. "You look like Henry," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Same eyes." Without preamble, he placed a scratched flash drive on the table between us. "Your grandfather's attorney recorded everything. Insurance, he called it." That night, alone in my apartment, I plugged in the drive. A trembling voice filled my speakers. They forced me to forge the will. Graham and Diane Langford. They had copies of Henry's signatures, pulled one from a property deed from 1998. Graham said if I didn't cooperate, I'd regret it. "I'm leaving town tonight, if anything happens to me." The recording cut off. I played it 3 more times, each repetition hardening something inside me. The deed from 1998, the Lake Oswego property purchased as an investment. The forged signature matched it perfectly. Too perfectly. My father had orchestrated everything, the mastermind who ordered the forgery, who handled the attorney when he became a liability. My mother, using her social connections to silence questions. Their coordinated effort to erase my inheritance, to erase me, and Ethan, the willing beneficiary, complicit through his silence. The next morning, I drove to First Oregon Bank and rented a safety deposit box. The original will went inside, along with a notarized statement from Caleb. I made digital copies, storing them in encrypted cloud accounts on separate drives with trusted friends. I spent nights researching Oregon estate law, statute of limitations, forensic document examination, building my case brick by meticulous brick. "I'll testify," Caleb told me over coffee a week later. "My reputation be damned." I reached across the table, squeezing his weathered hand. "This isn't just forgery, Caleb. It's time theft. They stole years I could have spent building on Henry's legacy. The trail led me to Bend, to a nursing home where Althea Monroe, now 82, lived in a small room filled with photographs. Henry's former housekeeper answered the door in a floral housecoat, her white hair pulled into a neat bun. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, gesturing me inside. Her trembling hands turned pages of a worn photo album. "I was there when he signed it, right in his study. Your mother was standing behind him." She paused at a photograph that made my breath catch. Henry at his desk, the attorney beside him, my mother's figure in the corner, June 2004. I sent a scan to Caleb that night. "It's admissible," he replied immediately. "They can't suppress this." I returned to my apartment 3 days later to find the door ajar. Inside, chaos. Drawers overturned, furniture slashed, my laptop smashed beyond repair, papers scattered across the floor like snow. Among them, a single note in my grandfather's blocky handwriting. "Legacy isn't inherited, it's earned." Not his words, a message from them, a warning of how far they'd go. I gathered the papers with steady hands, no longer trembling. Each piece of evidence, each threat, each lie exposed all of it, forming a clear picture, the puzzle finally taking shape. They'd stolen my inheritance, my place, my voice, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd left me alive to fight back. A week later, my phone vibrated against the coffee table, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "We need to talk about what you've been doing," he said without preamble, his voice tight with something between anger and fear. I leaned back in my chair, watching Portland's skyline through my loft window. "I'm not doing anything, Ethan. I'm pursuing the truth. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Mom? To Dad?" His voice cracked slightly. "People are talking, Beatrice." Of course they are. I'd noticed the sideways glances at the grocery store, the sudden cancellations from old family friends. Diane Langford's whisper campaign was operating at full throttle. Subtle insinuations about my mental state, carefully crafted rumors questioning my motives. In Portland society, my mother's soft-spoken concern carried more weight than shouted accusations ever could. "The Rotary Club disinvited Mom from speaking next month," Ethan continued. 30 years of charity work, and suddenly they're going in another direction. I swallowed the bitter satisfaction rising in my throat. "That sounds difficult for her. Dad's having people look into your finances. He thinks if you're desperate for money—" "I'm not desperate for anything except the truth," I cut him off. "And I have nothing to hide." What I didn't tell him was that Graham's business connections had already started their work. My mortgage lender had called yesterday with concerns about my application from 3 years ago. The art gallery where I occasionally sold my photographs had suddenly reviewed their consignment agreement. Small, coordinated pressure points designed to paint me as unstable and greedy. "Just stop this before it gets worse," Ethan pleaded, a familiar note of condescension creeping back into his voice. "For everyone's sake." After hanging up, I checked my email to find a message from Caleb. Someone had followed him home from the grocery store yesterday, a friendly reminder that he might want to reconsider his testimony. The threat wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. I wrapped my arms around myself, fighting the familiar instinct to retreat, to make peace at any cost. That's what they were counting. The Beatrice who smoothed things over, who saved the company with her $520,000, and then walked away quietly when dismissed. But that Beatrice was gone. I arranged a meeting with Sandra Miller the next morning, bringing every document I'd gathered so far. The federal prosecutor's office felt like a fortress compared to my vulnerable apartment. "This isn't just probate fraud," Sandra said, studying Henry's original will through reading glasses. "If your father threatened your grandfather's lawyer, who then disappeared, we're looking at potential federal crimes." I pushed a manila folder across her desk. "I've cataloged everything chronologically. The will, witness statements, financial records from 2004 forward." Sandra raised an eyebrow as she flipped through my meticulous timeline. "You've been busy. I worked with numbers for years. Patterns matter." I spread out a second set of documents. "This is what I found in the company records. Look at the transactions after Henry died." Her finger traced the column of figures, multiple shell companies, property transfers, all neatly structured to avoid detection. They didn't just forge grandfather's will, they systematically erased any financial connection between him and me. I tapped the bottom figure. "And they've been doing similar things with other properties for years." Sandra removed her glasses, fixing me with a steady gaze. "You understand what you're doing? This isn't just about inheritance anymore. You're mapping a conspiracy." My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Meet us at the lodge. We just want to talk. The Langford Lodge at Crystal Lake sat deep in Deschutes County, a private retreat left over from their old resort portfolio. I drove the winding forest road alone, headlights cutting through early evening darkness. My recording app was ready on my phone, tucked into my jacket pocket. The lake glimmered under candlelight through tall windows as I parked beside Ethan's Range Rover. For a moment, I sat watching the scene. It looked like a family reunion rather than an ambush. Inside, they'd arranged themselves like a portrait, Diane and her pearls at one end of the table, Graham tired but defiant at the other. Ethan stood pouring wine, his smile too practiced to be genuine. "Beatrice," my mother said, rising halfway before settling again. "Thank you for coming." Graham cleared his throat. "We thought it was time to clear the air. Direct conversation is always best," I said, taking the seat across from Ethan, keeping my hands where they could reach the phone. Diane sipped her wine. "This situation has gotten out of hand. We're worried about you. Your health," Graham clarified. "The stress of these delusions." I noticed the folder beside his elbow. "What's that?" Ethan slid it across the table. A solution, simple, clean, final. Inside was a single document, a waiver of all claims against the Langford estate. "One signature, and it's over," Graham said. "We'll even establish a trust for you. Not what you imagine you deserve, but enough." I pretended to consider the document. "What exactly am I waiving here?" "Everything," Ethan said bluntly. "All claims. All rights to challenge the will. All this nonsense about forgery. She doesn't need to carry Dad's mess anymore," he continued, turning to Graham. "You already handled that lawyer, right, Dad?" The silence that followed confirmed everything. My father didn't deny it, didn't even flinch. My mother's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her wineglass. I stood slowly, leaving the document unsigned on the table. "I'm done pretending. Beatrice." Diane's voice followed me to the door. "Family loyalty still means something." I turned back one last time. "Yes, it does. That's exactly why I'm doing this." Driving away, I noticed headlights among the trees, quickly extinguished. Someone watching. I checked that my recording had saved properly. Ethan's damning admission was now preserved for Sandra. Over the next 2 weeks, my support network proved stronger than I expected. Althea Monroe, despite her failing health, agreed to sign a sworn affidavit about witnessing Henry's will signing. Caleb rejected a substantial bribe from Graham's attorney, recording the offer instead. "I'm reopening the case with federal resources," Sandra told me during our third meeting. "What you've built here is extraordinary." Together, we filed a formal complaint with the Oregon Bar Association and a petition to reopen probate based on new evidence. The local business journal ran a small piece questioning Langford Holdings' financial practices. I heard Diane's charity board was holding an emergency meeting about their association with her. Graham suffered his first health episode the day after receiving legal notifications. My phone rang at midnight. Ethan, his voice raw. "What do you want?" he demanded. "Just tell us. Name your price." I thought about the $520,000 I gave them, about the years of manipulation, about Henry's will hidden from me. I want what grandfather intended. After hanging up, I made a decision I'd avoided for years. The next morning, I drove to Mount Calvary Cemetery with white roses clutched in my hand. Henry's headstone was simple gray granite, his name and dates etched in classic font. I placed the roses as I did when I was a child, arranging them just so against the cold stone. From my purse, I withdrew his letter, the paper thin from repeated folding and unfolding. I read it aloud, my voice steady in the quiet morning air. "If she stands before you, she has already carried more weight than any man in this family." For the first time since this began, tears came. Not tears of pain or anger, but something cleansing, healing. The weight of doubt lifted as I embraced the strength he always saw in me. "I won't let them erase you," I whispered to his headstone. "Or me." Over the following days, Sandra methodically prepared our federal case for court. Evidence organized chronologically, witness statements notarized, Althea's deposition recorded before her health declined further. Our court date was set for 3 weeks later. I bought a new suit, practiced my testimony in the mirror, built my resolve like a wall stone by stone. All the pieces were falling into place, the quiet before the storm. The night before our court date, a manila envelope appeared under my apartment door. No sender, no markings. Inside was a single photograph of Henry's study at the family mansion. Something was circled in red marker, the painting behind his desk, the one of Mount Hood at sunset. I studied it closer and saw what I'd never noticed before. The slightest misalignment, the hint of something behind it, a safe, a hidden safe I never knew existed. If there was evidence still in that safe, it could be the final piece we needed. But obtaining it meant breaking into the family mansion. Impossible, dangerous, and potentially illegal. I stared at the photograph for a long moment before picking up my phone. "Sandra," I said when she answered, "there's something else." The warrant for the Langford mansion arrived at dawn, a testament to Sandra Miller's efficiency. I stood on the sidewalk watching federal marshals gather, their navy jackets stark against the pale morning sky. My heart hammered against my ribs as Sandra approached, manila folder tucked under her arm. "Ready?" she asked, echoing our courthouse exchange from weeks earlier. This time my hands didn't tremble. More than ever. The family estate loomed before us, its limestone facade no longer intimidating but merely stone and mortar. The marshals fanned out across the property as Sandra rang the bell. Long seconds passed before the door swung open to reveal my father, bathrobe hastily belted at his waist, sleep still clouding his eyes. The shock that transformed Graham Langford's face when he spotted me was worth every sleepless night of the past 3 months. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, the great orator suddenly speechless. "Federal warrant to search the premises," Sandra announced, extending the document. "Step aside, Mr. Langford." Behind him, my mother appeared on the stairs, her silk robe perfectly arranged despite the early hour. Only the slight twitch at the corner of her eye betrayed her shock. Diane Langford had spent a lifetime perfecting her composure, but even perfection cracks under enough pressure. "Beatrice," she said, voice smooth as polished stone, "what exactly do you hope to accomplish with this theater?" I met her gaze without flinching. "The truth, Mother, nothing more." The marshals moved through the house with practiced efficiency. I led them directly to Grandfather Henry's study, my footsteps sure despite the years since I'd walked these halls. The familiar scent of leather-bound books and cedarwood hung in the air, unchanged by time or betrayal. "There," I pointed to the painting that dominated the wall behind his desk. Behind the painting. The marshal carefully removed the heavy frame, revealing the wall safe I'd only learned about 3 days ago. My father's face drained of color as he realized what was happening. "You need a combination," he said, voice strained with false confidence. I stepped forward, fingers hovering over the dial. The 14th of May, 1990. My birth date, the only date Grandfather would use for something this important. The safe that held his secrets was always meant for me to find. The lock clicked open on the first try. The family attorney arrived 20 minutes later, breathless and disheveled. His arguments bounced harmlessly off Sandra's calm recitation of the warrant's parameters. In the dining room, my father clutched at his chest, claiming heart palpitations to delay his testimony. Mother had retreated to her study, phone pressed to her ear as she called in favors from board members, politicians, anyone with leverage over the investigation. "Your brother's on the move," Caleb reported when he called. "Tried to visit Althea at the nursing home an hour ago." My stomach tightened. Did they let him in? Staff was warned. They turned him away. Caleb paused, his voice dropping. "They're getting desperate, Beatrice. Watch yourself." The safe yielded treasures beyond my expectations. Grandfather's handwritten journal chronicled conversations about the inheritance. His careful script detailing suspicions about my father's intentions. Letters between Henry and his lawyer expressed growing concerns about interference in his estate planning. Photos of family gatherings bore dates contradicting the official timeline my parents had presented to the court, but the real prize was a small USB drive tucked in the back corner. Sandra's tech specialist confirmed it contained company financial records from 2004, but also before that, the year the lawyer disappeared, and the records were allegedly lost in a server crash. "There's an audio file," the specialist said, connecting the drive to his laptop. The room fell silent as my grandfather's voice filled the air, steady and clear despite his age. "This recording serves as verbal confirmation of my wishes. In the event of my death, all assets and holdings of Langford Estates shall pass to my granddaughter, Beatrice Ann Langford. She alone has demonstrated the integrity and vision to carry forward what I've built." Something broke loose inside my chest. Vindication after years of doubt. The next morning, the local newspaper ran a front-page article quoting sources close to the family, portraying me as unstable and vindictive. The story claimed I abandoned the family business during a critical period, conveniently omitting my $520,000 contribution that saved it from collapse. "They're running the playbook," Sandra observed, scanning the article. Character assassination, social isolation, institutional pressure. Society friends who once welcomed me now crossed the street to avoid conversation. Emails circulated questioning Caleb's credibility as a witness. Political connections reached out to Sandra's superiors, suggesting the case lacked merit and wasted department resources. But the tide began to turn when 3 former Langford Holdings employees stepped forward with sworn statements about my role in saving the company. The accounting firm confirmed the existence of my $520,000 loan, producing documentation my parents claimed was lost. Sandra arranged a press conference with the Department of Justice, transforming what began as a private inheritance dispute into a matter of public record. Caleb's meticulous documentation revealed a pattern of legal manipulation stretching back years. At the nursing home, Althea's condition deteriorated, but her mind remained sharp. Her nurse helped record video testimony, preserving her account of the will signing for the court. She was always there, Althea said in the recording, her papery hands smoothing an imaginary tablecloth, standing behind him while he signed, making sure he did what they wanted. 2 board members resigned from Langford Holdings, citing personal reasons. A bank audit flagged questionable transactions in Ethan's accounts. Diane's charity organization launched an internal review after questions arose about financial discrepancies. Judge Matt Kinney denied my parents' motion to delay proceedings, his order citing compelling evidence of potential elder abuse. The family's carefully constructed reputation unraveled thread by thread. I spotted them in the courthouse parking lot. Mother and father, heads bent close together, voices raised in a way they would never allow in public. Father jabbed a finger in mother's face, his words carrying across the asphalt. "You said no one would check the signatures." Later that week, Ethan made a scene at a downtown Portland club, drinking heavily and shouting obscenities at anyone who mentioned the family name. The family attorney requested a private meeting with Sandra, sliding a settlement offer across the table that acknowledged some of my claims while protecting my parents from criminal charges. "We just want to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding," he said, voice oily with false sincerity. Sandra slid the paper back without opening it. "We're well past that point now." Security measures transformed my apartment into a fortress. New locks, security system, cameras at all entrances. The court date moved up due to Althea's declining health, accelerating our timeline. "They're desperate," Sandra warned during our final evidence review. "Be careful." I nodded, surprising myself with the calm certainty I felt. Grandfather always said truth has patience. The night before court, my phone rang at midnight. Caleb's voice crackled with barely contained excitement. "I found something in the archive, the missing lawyer's final case notes. He recorded Graham threatening Henry directly. This connects intent to action, Beatrice." My breath caught as the implications crystallized. "Send it now." The document arrived by secure courier an hour later. My hands shook as I read the lawyer's detailed account of witnessing my father threaten my grandfather over the will, the final piece that transformed our case from inheritance dispute to criminal conspiracy. "They didn't just steal from me," I whispered into the empty room, shock rippling through me. "They threatened him." Federal charges now loomed inevitable, regardless of the probate outcome. As dawn broke on court day, I stood before the mirror, straightening my blazer with steady hands. The woman who stared back bore little resemblance to the one who trembled in this courthouse months ago. Her eyes held no doubt, her shoulders no burden of shame. Today, truth finally took the stand. The courtroom brimmed with whispers and camera clicks, a pressure cooker of anticipation. I entered through the heavy oak doors with measured steps, so different from the uncertainty that plagued me when this all began. My navy blazer, selected with purpose this morning, felt like armor against what was coming. On the opposite side, my family presented their united front. Graham, looking older than his 68 years, sat with his fingers laced together too tightly. Diane's pearls gleamed under the fluorescent lights as she whispered something to Ethan. Their attorney Richards, a shark in an expensive suit, leaned across the aisle as I passed. "You're about to be destroyed, Miss Langford," he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here for the truth." The words surprised even me with their clarity. This wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about setting right what was wrongfully taken. Sandra Miller sat beside me, arranging evidence folders with methodical precision. Her confidence steadied me as Judge Matt Kinney entered, and the court rose in unison. The first day proceeded according to their script. Witness after witness paraded to the stand, each one painting me as unstable, incompetent, ungrateful. Former board members whose names I barely recognized described erratic decision-making. Family friends testified to my concerning behavior with rehearsed concern. Ethan took the stand in the afternoon, his performance almost impressive. Tears glistened in his eyes as he described trying to protect the family legacy from my reckless management. My brother, who never attended a budget meeting, who couldn't name 3 properties in our portfolio, suddenly portrayed himself as the company's savior. My mother followed with her practiced performance of maternal concern. "We only wanted what was best for Beatrice," she said, touching her throat with manicured fingers. "She was never suited for leadership, despite our hopes." Graham testified last, his voice grave as he explained how every decision was necessary for company survival. The courtroom absorbed his words like gospel, Portland's real estate legend defending his empire against an ungrateful daughter. Richard smirked throughout, his confidence radiating across the aisle. By evening, adjournment whispers followed me through the courthouse corridors. Poor, deluded Beatrice, fighting her own family for nothing. I slept exactly 4 hours that night. The following morning, Sandra rose from our table. The prosecution calls Sandra Miller to the stand, not as an attorney now but as a witness. An unusual move that caused a ripple of confusion through the gallery. "Ms. Miller, please present your findings regarding Langford Holdings LLC," Judge McKinney instructed. Sandra activated a projector displaying a meticulous timeline. "What you're seeing is the documented history of Langford Holdings from 2004 through 2019. She pressed a button. A recording filled the courtroom. Ethan's voice, slightly muffled but unmistakable. "Dad already handled that, lawyer." Then Graham's deeper tone, "We just want to protect the family name." The atmosphere shifted like the weather before a storm. Richard stood to object, but Sandra was already advancing to her next exhibit. "Your Honor, I present the video deposition of Althea Monroe, taken 2 weeks ago." Althea appeared on screen, her 82-year-old hands trembling slightly as she recounted witnessing Henry Langford sign his original will in 2004. Ms. Diane was standing behind him the whole time, she said, watching every move like a hawk. Photographs appeared next, time-stamped images confirming Althea's testimony, then financial records showing my $520,000 loan and the board meeting minutes from my dismissal 3 months later. Judge McKinney leaned forward, his interest visibly piqued. "For the record," he stated, "this court acknowledges prior acquaintance with the decedent Henry Langford. I see no conflict of interest." Neither side raised objections. His questions became increasingly pointed as the evidence unfolded, revealing a deeper understanding of my grandfather's intentions than I'd anticipated. When Sandra called her surprise witness Jessica Barnes, former assistant to my grandfather's missing lawyer, the family's facade began crumbling visibly. Jessica described documents destroyed under pressure and threats made in hushed tones. Caleb followed with recovered case notes. The technical expert demonstrated forged signatures with overlay projections that left no room for interpretation. Banking records revealed suspicious transfers occurring days after Henry's death, each piece built upon the last with devastating precision. Richard's objections grew more desperate as the hours passed. By afternoon, even he seemed to recognize the inevitable. "Your Honor," Sandra said, "we present our final exhibit, a handwritten letter from Henry Langford to his granddaughter." She read the words I'd carried in my heart. "If she stands before you, she has already carried more weight than any man in this family." My mother's composure finally shattered. Her fingers gripped her pearls so tightly I feared they'd snap. Graham clutched the table edge, his complexion ashen as his health visibly faltered. Ethan stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes, not even mine. The judge reviewed the evidence one final time, his expression contemplative. "This case isn't complicated," he said finally. "It's criminal." His verdict came swiftly, all holdings of Langford Estates restored to me, with defendants charged with forgery and obstruction of justice. Criminal charges referred to the district attorney's office for further prosecution. As the court adjourned, I caught my mother's shocked whisper to Graham, "You promised this would never happen." Outside the courtroom, Ethan blocked my path, desperation etched across his face. "You've ruined everything." The accusation held no power anymore. "No," I told him quietly. "You did that yourselves." The judge's final statement addressed the elder abuse element specifically, recognizing my clear intentions and my efforts to uncover the truth. The gavel struck with finality, its echo reverberating through the now silent room. I exhaled slowly, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. There was no triumph in watching my family's disgrace, only relief that truth had finally prevailed. Sandra placed her hand on my shoulder. Henry would be proud. For the first time since this began, I believed that might be true. The national news vans finally disappeared from the courthouse steps. 3 months after the verdict, my name still appeared in legal journals and whispered conversations at Portland galas I no longer attended. Graham surrendered his real estate license 2 days before a massive stroke left the right side of his body paralyzed. Diane vanished from charity boards without explanation, retreating behind the walls of a much smaller house in Lake Oswego. And Ethan, golden boy no more, now hammered nails into foundation frames in Bend, building modest homes in the very town where Langford Holdings once constructed only luxury properties. The irony wasn't lost on me. I drove the familiar winding road to Crystal Lake as evening settled across the water. The same road I traveled months ago with dread coiling in my stomach now felt different, almost peaceful. The lodge sat unchanged, its weathered timbers reflecting gold in the setting sun. I parked where I did that night, but this time no headlights waited in the trees, no trap waited inside. The lake water shimmered calm and clear, carrying none of the tension that hung in the air during my last visit. I walked to the edge of the dock, my grandfather's note folded in my pocket. The paper had grown soft from my handling it over the years, those blocky letters fading but still legible. Legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. I pulled out Henry's silver lighter, the one possession of his I kept all these years, and flicked it open. The flame caught the corner of the note, an orange glow spreading across his handwriting. Ashes drifted from my fingers, scattering across the water's surface and disappearing into ripples. They laughed when I walked in. I whispered to the darkening water, but they weren't laughing when I walked out. Last week, I met with 3 whistleblowers from Pacific Northwest Financial. The week before, 4 retirees who lost everything in an investment scheme. Yesterday, a single mother battling a predatory lender. Their stories differed, but the pattern remained the same: power silencing truth, money crushing justice. In their faces, I saw reflections of my own journey. Justice means nothing if it stops at the courthouse door. The Langford settlement sat mostly untouched in my account. $4.6 million felt almost vulgar after living comfortably in my loft for so long. Now I had a purpose for it. The Langford Foundation for Legal Integrity opened its doors last month. We offer free legal aid to those silenced by power. The irony of using the Langford name wasn't lost on me, but perhaps that was the point. Names like legacies can be redefined. 1 year later, I stood before 28 law students at the University of Oregon. Chalk dust clung to my fingers as I wrote 2 sentences on the board: integrity builds legacy. Legacy isn't given, it's built. Their eyes followed my movements, some skeptical, others curious. They'd read about my case, of course. It appeared in their textbooks now, nestled between chapters on probate fraud and elder abuse. But they were here for more than legal precedent. They were drawn to the human element, the courage to stand alone against family pressure. Diane wrote occasionally, her elegant stationery carrying careful words of reconciliation. Graham's recovery had left him dependent on round-the-clock nurses. Ethan's calloused hands and sunburned neck told of slow humbling through honest work. I read their letters with compassion but without surrender. Forgiveness doesn't require reunion. Peace exists in boundaries rather than bitterness. I paused before erasing the board, catching the sound of laughter drifting through the open window. For years, laughter had been a weapon, my mother's cutting sound designed to diminish. Today the students' laughter felt life-affirming, natural, and healing. Through the window, students crossed the campus green, spring sunshine streaming through budding trees. My reflection superimposed over them, a bridge between generations, between what was and what could be. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't ache, it healed. Legacy isn't inheritance but impact. The circle completed itself, from silenced daughter to empowered teacher. I caught myself smiling, not the practiced Langford smile of my youth, but something genuine, something real, something Henry would recognize.